Hey dude, I recently found out the real life inspirations behind the original Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it's so crazy I wanted to share it with you. Here's what I learned. We know, if you've seen the movie, that the movie focuses on a group of teenagers in Springwood, Ohio, who all start having the same nightmare. Each dream features a burned man wearing this dirty red and green sweater and a glove with metal blades for fingers. Now, because the teens are all dreaming about him at the same time, and he is pretty dreamy after all, they start to compare notes, and that's when they notice the most alarming and probably obvious thing about the entire situation. If Freddy hurts them in the dream, then they wake up with matching injuries in real life. Now, because of this strange link between dreams and reality, that situation escalates pretty damn quick. Tina dies in her sleep, and Rod ends up being blamed for it, and Nancy starts having her own violent nightmares as well. She actually wakes up from one of them with a real burn mark on her arm. And that burn mark forces Nancy to then take the dreams even more serious. And as a result of that, she starts to share what she's been experiencing with the adults in her life, who of course don't fully believe her. Rod eventually dies as well after Freddy attacks him from inside one of his dreams. And this pattern convinces Nancy that something is super unchill about all of this. Nancy's decision to speak up leads her mom to take her to a sleep clinic. Now, during one of these monitored sessions at the clinic, Nancy almost dies again, but she wakes up this time holding Freddy's hat in her hands. Now, because this object came from the dream world into reality, Nancy's mother finally opens up and tells Nancy the truth. Nancy's mom explains that this person that all of the teenagers are seeing in their dream is a real dude named Freddy Krueger, and he was once an actual murderer who escaped punishment because of some trial technicality. I don't know, dude, some BS, if you ask me. But when that happened, the parents who lived on Elm Street at the time, they basically cornered Freddy in his house and just lit it up, dude. Lit the whole thing on fire. Now, as a direct result of those actions, Freddy Krueger began taking revenge by targeting their children from inside their dreams. He waited a whole ass generation to target the kids of the people that murdered him. Savage. Once Nancy understands this full story, she tries to stay awake to avoid Freddy altogether, but that plan fails eventually because exhaustion will win no matter how hard you try to fight it. And since Nancy can't avoid sleeping for forever, she decides the only solution is to bring Freddy out of the dream world and into the real world. If she can do that, then he'll probably be vulnerable and be able to be hurt like everybody else. They can actually do some damage and maybe defeat him. Well, Nancy dozes off and she executes on that plan, and it goes swimmingly. Dude, she pulls Freddy back out into the real world. She defeats him. All of her friends that died are now alive again, and everything is cool again, dude. Yes, this is awesome. But if you watch the movie, and it came out in '84, by the way, so if you haven't, I don't think I need a spoiler alert. The final twist of the movie shows that this safe world that Nancy woke up in is still a dream. Freddy is still controlling the entire thing. Her friends are not alive. Freddy is still out there. Freddy wins. The movie feels so imaginative. Dude, I remember watching it when I was, of course, way too young, like you did too. But I started wondering about where the actual story or stories that happened in real life that inspired the events of the movie, and I wanted to learn more about them. I came across something crazy unsettling and much more scary than what actually happens in the movie. The idea behind Freddy Krueger was actually shaped by a strange pattern of deaths that took place in the US between the late 70s and the early 80s. Now, after the Vietnam War ended in 1975, thousands of Hmong refugees resettled from the Thai refugee camps into America. And many of them moved from these small farm villages where you grow and eat everything to these big cities that are filled with neon signs, 24-hour fast food chains, supermarkets, and just nonstop TV, dude. This huge cultural change created tons of stress for these people, but it also brought relief because it actually allowed them to escape years of violence and fear, compared to where they were coming from. However, as they settled into these new environments, something very unexpected followed them. A wave of unexplained sleep deaths that confused doctors and terrified families. One case specifically involved a man named Yang Lang Tao, who was 47 years old, and he ended up resettling in Portland, Oregon with his wife and their 8 kids. In January of 1981, he was staying up late, watching TV. It was well after midnight, and he decides finally it's time to go to bed. So he crawls into bed, and as he's doing this, he accidentally wakes up his wife. She stirs a little bit, but no worries, because within a few seconds, they both drift off to sleep together. No sweat. But just a few hours later, the wife wakes up because it sounds like something in the room is struggling to breathe and gasping for air. Worried, of course, she springs up to an upright position and she turns over to start shaking her husband, who is the one that's gasping for air. She's scared in this moment and she's calling out his name, Yang, 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 and she's still shaking him until he finally lets out one final gasp, and then she lets out this blood-curdling scream. Yang had passed. Right in front of her. Let me get some water real quick. Now, when the medical examiner reviewed that body, or his body, his name was Dr. Lumen, nothing could explain the death. However, the doctor did mention something about having deja vu, and that's because just 3 days earlier, Dr. Lumen was looking over another relatively young and healthy Hmong man from the same part of the world who had died in the exact same way. The mystery is now growing. Neither one of these men showed any signs of illnesses or injuries or potential poisonings. Nothing foul at all. Since standard tests revealed no abnormalities, the examiner, Dr. Lumen, reported no clear cause of death. He even had to type the word pending under the cause of death on his reports. As word of this starts to spread, additional cases start popping up into light. A city in Minnesota called St. Paul had 4 unexplained sleep deaths. Similar cases started popping up too in Seattle, Washington, Des Moines, Iowa, Orange County, California, and Minneapolis, Minnesota. Or I should say, Minnesota. Sorry, man. I have to. Everybody in Minnesota just clicked away now. That's okay. No, wait, come back. You're going to need the warmth that your phone produces when you listen to Spotify or YouTube. It's all good. Let's keep going. Now, by 1981, 13 cases had been fully identified with the Hmong refugee community. And some local groups actually believe that number was much closer to 20. Now, these men were all unrelated. They never shared any living spaces or medical histories. And because they died the same way without any explanation, doctors realized that they were very likely dealing with something new, something they've never seen before. Epidemiologist Dr. Tom Prendergast began to gather some data after reporters had asked him about strange deaths in California, which is where he practiced. His research uncovered at least 20 different cases involving healthy Hmong men who either died in their sleep or were found unresponsive during the night. Some of these deaths even dated back to 1977, and I would assume those would just be some of the earlier resettlers that came from the Thai refugee camps to America 2 years after the Vietnam War ended. Now, since the percentage of deaths in this particular group of men was much higher than the general population, Dr. Prendergast concluded that something specific and something very dangerous was happening. The Centers for Disease Control, or the CDC if you're cool, eventually recorded 35 different cases by the end of 1981. Doctors debated the possible causes. I mean, how could you not? You've got a group of doctors over here that seem to think that some of the deaths came from intense culture shock combined with years of just wartime trauma. And you've got another group of doctors over here that things like nerve agents that were used during the war might actually have long-term effects that triggered these episodes. Now, both of these theories made sense, kind of on the surface, but neither of them were really, case closed. Nerve agents don't only affect men, and they don't only strike at night. Now, because those theories actually ended up creating more questions than answers, a new explanation began to form. Dr. Lumen, if you remember from just a couple minutes ago, he suggested that this phenomenon may have existed in Hmong communities for generations. And the reason why it just suddenly appeared in these medical records was because those refugees now lived in cities where unexplained deaths were more thoroughly documented and investigated. Oh, hey, look, the people from Minnesota are back. Welcome back. You came at the right time because what happens next is crazy. Now, one Hmong man who lived in Seattle, Washington, he had a similar attack. However, this one was a major breakthrough because this dude actually survived. He made it to the hospital in time, and doctors found that his heart had gone into ventricular fibrillation, which is a dangerous rhythm where the heart starts to shake instead of beat regularly. Now, since he was able to receive treatment in time, he survived. And later tests on these dude showed damage similar to somebody who had looked like they'd had a mild heart attack previously. This discovery led Dr. Prendergast from California to theorize that the sudden deaths were caused by extremely fast cardiac events that left almost zero lasting signs for any autopsy to detect. While investigators looked deeper, they discovered similar conditions across most of Southeast Asia. In the Philippines, a long-known syndrome called Bangungot syndrome, which translates into nightmare syndrome, was believed to cause sudden sleep deaths. Something similar was also happening in Japan. It's a comparable condition that's known as pokuri, and it shows the same patterns. These conditions often affected young men and left little to no physical evidence behind, just like the deaths that were happening in the US. Now, because these patterns were lining up across multiple cultures in multiple parts of the world, doctors in the West eventually gave the condition an official name. They called it Sudden Unexplained Nocturnal Death Syndrome, or SUNS for short. And even the refugees confirmed that these kinds of deaths had been seen in their communities long before they resettled in the States, which helped rule out theories about chemical warfare or culture shock. And even later genetic studies showed that some Southeast Asian populations are way more likely to experience sudden heart rhythm disturbances during sleep. They really are just genetically predisposed to something like that, which would help explain the cluster of these cases. What are we talking about? Oh yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, let's talk about Wes Craven too, because he's the director, of course. Now, Craven discovered these stories, not from this YouTube video, that would be weird. He was actually reading an article from the LA Times in the early 80s. Now, because these events involved frightening dreams and unexplained deaths and a pattern across multiple communities, those details stayed with him. You see where this goes next, right? Craven later recalled reports of men who had nightmares that were so vivid that they were afraid to go to sleep entirely, only to die as soon as they finally did go to sleep. Now, whether he remembered every detail about these Hmong men correctly or not, I think is up in the air because there's nothing in the Hmong reports about them being afraid to go back to sleep. Nothing that, from what I can tell. He either made that up or maybe he's pulling that from something else that I just didn't come across. But either way, the fact that that particular piece of the element was added into the idea was just another element of disturbingness within the movie, which I think is so dope. Water time, let me get a drink. And that made him wonder, what would happen if something inside a dream could actually be the cause of the death? Now, around that same time, Wes Craven heard the 1975 pop hit from Gary Wright called Dreamweaver. This song is pretty dope. Check it out if you don't know what it is, but it's got this weird, inexplicably sinister synthy intro, which directly inspires the music of A Nightmare on Elm Street, and plus the lyrics in the chorus are Dreamweaver, I believe you can get me through the night. Now, in addition to Wes Craven reading these stories about the Hmong men and hearing Dreamweaver for the first time, he remembered one of his own childhood nightmares, one that made him beg his mom to go back to sleep with him so that she could protect him in Dreamland. Now, the idea of little Wes asking his mom to join him in Dreamland to protect him was cute, but it wasn't the only childhood trauma that would have an effect on the movie. The iconic villain, who would eventually star in A Nightmare on Elm Street, first took shape on a dark night in Cleveland, Ohio. Wes is 11 years old. It's the early 1950s. Him and his older brother, Paul, were asleep in their bedroom on the second story of their apartment when the future filmmaker was woken up by a noise coming from outside the window. Wes wakes up, he rubs his eyes a little bit, he's confused. He climbs out of bed, and then he makes his way over to the window to see what was going on outside. Well, he looks out, and then down on the street, right below the window, this ominous stranger is looking up at him. He's wearing a slouch hat and an overcoat, and he was just standing right outside the entrance, looking up at him through the window. I don't know why I said it that way. Now, this figure starts to walk towards the front door, and this, of course, scares the crap out of 11-year-old Wes. So he wakes up his bigger brother, Paul. His brother jumps out of bed, grabs a baseball bat, and the two of them creep out of their apartment and into the hallway to meet this dude. However, hallway's empty. They never see that person again. Craven has said in an interview since then that, the guy was probably just a drunk, stumbling around town, getting lost, and probably falling down out of sight somewhere. But clearly that terrified Wes, and he never forgot that night. There's another layer to the history here, and that is the inclusion of this particular evil boy that used to always beat up Wes when he was younger. Wes has again mentioned this in interviews, that there was this nasty little dude who was a little bit older than Wes at the time who would, quote, get their newspapers on the same corner, which I guess implied that they would see each other on the street, likely once a day. And this dude was always so mean to Wes, and in one particular year, that kid would just beat him up pretty regularly. Bummer, right? Can you guess what this bully's name was? Say it with me. Mark. No, I'm kidding. It was Freddy. Thank you for playing along, though. I got you. There's another bit to this that I also want to share with you as well. Craven was reading a story in 1982 from a magazine called Scientific American, and that magazine said that the two most clashing colors to the human retina are this particular shade of green and red. Now, of course, as he was designing the look of Freddy, he wanted this green and red combination to be very prevalent. That way, if Freddy were to, for example, change into something in the room, he'd still be recognizable because of the red and green striped situation. And as far as the name Elm Street goes, well, this particular street name was derived from a tree-lined stretch in Potsdam, New York, which is where Craven attended film school. And, believe it or not, the street's name, Elm Street, is never once mentioned in the original film. Now, if you combine all of these genuine medical mysteries and these cultural experiences and the childhood fears and the creative imagination, Wes Craven created one of the most memorable villains in movie history, period. Freddy Krueger was built from true stories that crossed over continents and challenged the medical community and, terrified families long before the character ever hit the screen. And because of that, A Nightmare on Elm Street remains one of the most unsettling horror films ever made. Thank you for letting me tell you about all of this. I'm glad you're still here. I know it's been a while. Hey, if you want any particular subjects covered by me, like the real stories behind other scary things, I will do that. Hope to see you soon. Hey, watch another one.